This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Ritual and Shelter. Looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics of magical history, theory, and practice, as well as tarot cards and oracle decks from well-known artists, and even decks created by local witches in Alabama. From teas, tonics, and tinctures to toad skulls and tourmaline towers, you can find all of these and so much more on their witchy website, ritualshelter.com, or in person. So lather up that flying ointment and travel down to Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama, or check them out online at ritualshelter.com. Did you run out of flying ointment? Well, they have that too. I've got a really special new offering for you all, and that is new Witch Wave ceremonial soap, which has been made in collaboration with my favorite soap company, 2 et al. 2 et al makes soap and skincare using traditional alchemical techniques to transform pure water and plant-based ingredients into beautiful, handcrafted, cold-processed soaps, which are also magically charged. These soaps are beyond bewitching and luxurious, and after being a hardcore fan of them for a while, I knew I wanted to collaborate with them, and I am so thrilled that they agreed. I'm overjoyed to now offer Witch Wave Soap by 2 et al, available now exclusively in the Witch Wave shop over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop. 2 et al founders Matthew and Natalie and I put our heads together to come up with a special soap blend that is deeply magical just for you. The Witch Wave blend incorporates such intentional ingredients as black salt for cleansing and protection, yarrow to aid in divination and love, and mugwort, also known as artemisia, for lunar connection and visionary insights. It's also blended with the most beautiful fragrant oils, including frankincense, which smells incredible and also helps amplify connection with the divine. We were invoking deities like Artemis and Hecate when designing the ingredients of the soap, as well as the packaging. You'll note the skeleton key on the side. And this soap can be used whenever you want to ready yourself for ritual work or simply as a daily ceremonial practice to help you cleanse and recenter into your own magic. So go ahead and order Witch Wave Soap by 2 et al and me over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop. And if you want to check out 2 et al's other incredible alchemical soap blends and skincare, you can do so at 2etal.co. That's TUETAL.co, and use offer code WitchWave15 for 15% off your order from the 2 et al website. So once again, you can get our new exclusive Witch Wave soap from the Witch Wave shop, and you can get 15% off other 2 et al offerings from their site, 2etal.co, with offer code WitchWave15. Hello, my friend. I am often asked about how people can get even more Witch Wave and more magic in their lives overall, and I have the answer. You can join me over on the Witch Wave Patreon. This is how you can hear from me and my other magical guests on a weekly basis via my Witch Wave Plus bi-weekly bonus episodes. And you get the regular Witch Wave episodes ad-free, and you get detailed show notes for all of it. And all Patreon members also get access to my monthly ritual workshops, which you can attend live or watch the recording of at your leisure throughout the month. Rewards for some tiers also include magical merch and contests where you can win witchly prizes, as well as early heads up about my workshops before they sell out, and opportunities to work with me one-on-one. And all backers get access to our exclusive digital coven, where you can connect to a community of other wonderful Witch Wave witches around the world. So head on over to patreon.com/witchwave and sign up. It's a magnificent way to get more magic in your life and to support the show. Thank you so much.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello, and welcome to The Witch Wave. My friends, this is my last episode before we go on winter break, and we will indeed be returning on January 8th, 2025. However, I do have a few offerings outside of the podcast between now and then to tide you over. First of all, tomorrow, which is Thursday, December 19th, Jonica Stuckey and I will be leading an online ritual workshop to ready us for the winter solstice. And the workshop is called Starfire, and we'll be focusing on stellar magic and how starlight of all kinds can help us navigate the darkness. You can register at pamgrossman.com/events or via the link in my Phantasmaphile Instagram bio, and pricing is sliding scale as always. And yes, it will be recorded if you can't make it live, so do sign up if this calls to you. It's going to be shimmery and beautiful and so good for your soul and your solstice. And if you're a member of the Patreon Witch Wave Coven, I will also indeed still be doing our monthly online ritual, this time for Capricorn season. And that will be taking place on Monday, December 23rd. And I'll be focusing, of course, a little bit on Yule, but mostly on the god Janus. Janus, who is the Roman god of gateways and transitions, and whose name is what January is derived from. So it's going to be a beautiful way to close out the year and start setting intentions for the new year. You can join me live via the link on Patreon, or you can watch the recording afterward to get yourself magically prepared to celebrate all of those holy end of year and beginning of year moments. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out the post on Patreon now. And this very episode that you're listening to right now is also very relevant to the winter solstice, which, as you know, is the longest night of the year. And it's relevant because my guest, Lakshmi Ramgopal, also known as Lykanthea, talks with me all about her new album of gorgeous and highly personal lullabies. Now, even if you don't know it, you are already very familiar with some of Lykanthea's music because her song Hand and I has been the Witch Wave theme music since the podcast's inception. And 8 seasons in, I still love it so much and can think of no better music to set the tone and hold the space for the magic that we generate here on the show. And Lykanthea's music is very sacred to me. Her EP, which Hand and I is from, is called Migration. And I listen to Migration, I'm not exaggerating here, literally every time I sit down to start a creative project. It's like my sonic lucky charm, and it helps me shift into a more receptive and ritualistic state of mind. So I am endlessly grateful to Lakshmi for making this music. And you can now imagine how excited I was when I first heard that her project Lykanthea was going to have a new full-length album out called Some Viscera. And Lakshmi describes this as an album of lullabies, which incorporates the birds, flowers, symbols, and ceremonies, which are deeply rooted in her Indian ancestry. Some Viscera is out now. I am addicted to it. It is so beautiful, and we talk about it extensively. But after we spoke, I became fascinated by the notion of lullabies, which are meant to soothe and help us sleep. But as you'll hear Lakshmi describe, they so often incorporate lyrics which are very dark and belie our fears and anxieties. Think about the lyrics to Rockabye Baby. I mean, that is some creepy shit, right? And so when I looked up the etymology of the word lullaby, I wasn't surprised that the Middle English root words are lull, which means to calm or to send to sleep, and by, which actually means near. And so we're conjuring calmness, we're bringing sleep and soothing near to us when we sing or hear a lullaby. Okay, that makes sense, right? But I was surprised and so thrilled when I learned of this one theory that the word lullaby has a much older folk etymology, which is derived from the Hebrew phrase Lilith Abi, which means Lilith be gone. Now, Lilith has become reclaimed by modern witches as this feminist dark goddess who was allegedly Adam's first wife and who refused to lie beneath him and left the Garden of Eden to become the mother of demons. I know, such a badass, I adore. But we must remember that there's a much longer tradition of Lilith being a demoness that Jewish people, especially Jewish new parents, were terrified of because it was believed that Lilith either stole or killed newborn babies. And so a lot of old Jewish amulet magic is about protecting babies and cribs and houses from Lilith. And so a lullaby is perhaps a song that one might have sung to protect a baby while it sleeps and to keep Lilith away. And there's another layer to this, which is that Lilith was often portrayed as having wings, and her name and the Hebrew word for screech owl or night owl are related. Sometimes they're considered the same word. And so there are many who believe that the reason that witches and owls are connected are because of these much older ideas about deadly magical women who could shapeshift into owls and other birds. And we see this connection between dark feminine witchly beings and nocturnal birds cross-culturally. But again, many believe that much of that folklore is derived from these old stories about Lilith and even earlier counterparts of hers. So as you listen to my conversation with Lakshmi and later listen to her new Lykanthea album, Some Viscera, I'd like you to bear in mind that these are songs that are protective and cathartic, and are perhaps powerful spells, which help transmute loss and aching into beauty and protection and love. But before we get to that, first, let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches.
Emily writes, I enjoyed the brief interlude during the Joanna Ebenstein interview, where you broadly brushed upon the idea of Jewish and Catholic culture's inclination toward magic versus the stuffier character of Protestants. It had me nodding along in recognition. Disclosure, I grew up Presbyterian. And while the attitudes in my family and specific church community allowed for curiosity and questions, I perceived the more rigid walls of Protestant culture at large. Hence, I can say that a person with an inherent appetite for magic, who grows up in a spiritual tradition that lacks that element, could be like a watermelon grown in a box. You'll either turn out box-shaped, or at some point, you'll bust through it and shake off the splinters. You'll probably still have a few scrapes and dents, though. There I am. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about all that. And I love your watermelon analogy. I'm so glad that you've busted out of that box. And I'll just say that everybody has a different path to witchcraft. It's one of the reasons I love this practice so much. It's one of the reasons that I love witches so much, that there's no one way to be a witch. Some people are drawn to this because their religion of origin or lack thereof was insufficient for them somehow. And so it becomes this really nourishing alternative for them, like it seems to be for you. But then there are others of us who don't reject our religious upbringing outright or entirely, but who are looking to supplement it or embellish it or reframe it. And that's why I always say that, yes, there are indeed Jewish witches or Jewitches, like I call myself, and Catholic witches and Protestant witches and Hindu witches and Muslim witches and so on and so forth. We're each allowed to weave our own spiritual tapestry, no matter what anyone else says. Magic is our birthright, and we are each empowered to find it and make it in whatever context or style we desire. And furthermore, we're allowed to keep redefining it and changing it throughout the course of our lives. In fact, I think we're supposed to. Magic is a living system. It's fluid and evolutionary and revolutionary. So as far as I'm concerned, you do not have to choose between your ancestral upbringing and your more contemporary calling and curiosity. You can blend them together if you want to. It's totally allowed. We're here to find the things that make us come alive and feel inspired and generate the most creativity and love that we possibly can. And if you have an upbringing that makes you feel confined, shamed, rejected, judged, then by all means, please turn away from those aspects of it. But also know that you are allowed to take the parts of it that are meaningful for you and bring them forward into your witchcraft practice if you'd like to. And if not, that's totally fine. You are in charge of your own enchantment. Never forget that. Now, on to my guest. Lakshmi Ramgopal is a musician and dancer who performs under the name Lykanthea. Her electro-mythic debut EP, Migration, received much-deserved praise from outlets such as the Chicago Tribune, Noisy, and Public Radio International's The World. She's collaborated with Savage Sister on their Sundrowned EP, and she's been creating and performing music via sound installations and performances for spaces such as the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art and Chicago's Lincoln Park Conservatory. Her new project, Some Viscera, marks a shift in instrumentation, drawing more heavily on her training in South Indian classical or Carnatic music, as well as organic sounds from analog instruments, birdsong, and lullabies. It touches on atavistic questions of motherhood and personal legacy. Some Viscera premiered at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago in September of this past year, and the music of Some Viscera is now available in a standalone album. In addition to all of that, performing both solo and with her ensemble, Lakshmi has done site-specific immersive shows in spaces like Chicago's Edgar Miller's Glasner Studio and Garfield Park Conservatory, and in the middle of a freshwater stream. Lakshmi received her PhD in classics from the University of Chicago, and she is currently assistant professor of history at Columbia University with a focus on the Roman Empire. One quick note about the show, there was a bit of a sound quality issue on Lakshmi's end, so apologies for some occasional snap, crackle, poppin', and thanks for your understanding. Lakshmi joined me remotely from her office in New York City. Lakshmi Ramgopal, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Hi, Pam. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be talking to you, and I will say talking to you again because deep cut Witch Wave listeners know that you have been on the show as a Witch Wave Plus episode many, many moons ago. This was during the pandemic, and a lot has changed since then, so I'm so happy to talk to you under what I think are better circumstances.
Yes, definitely. And I'm really, really honored to be back. Yeah, just so appreciative of your continued interest and support in my work.
Oh my goodness. It is such selfishly motivated interest, but you're welcome anyway. I have been raving about you and what your music means to me for many, many, many years now. And I imagine that I will say this at the top of the show, but I will just say once again for your benefit, having your song Hand and Eye be the anthem of the Witch Wave is such a gift. And your whole first EP, Migration, I keep calling it talismanic because I listen to it so much. You are always on my Spotify most listened to songs because I listen to it on repeat. It is so important to me and really helps shift me into a magical creative space. So I cannot thank you enough for real, for real.
Oh my God, thank you. I don't even know what to say.
You don't have to say anything. So I'm thrilled because I'm addicted to that EP, but of course I'm greedy and I want more. I want more music from you. And when we spoke in 2020, you said then that you had a new album hopefully coming out next year, which was 2021.
Right.
Well, here we are in 2024, and that new album is finally out. It is called Some Viscera, and it is so exquisite. Oh my God. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I know, it was so long ago in a way that we talked.
Exactly. So let's first talk about the obvious. What took so long and how are you feeling about it being released now? I mean, I believe in divine timing. I think things unfold as they're meant to. But just because I'm such a fangirl of yours, I'm being nosy and I want to know what slowed down the process for you.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally right. The divine timing played a role in what initially seemed like a delay. And I think in the end was like a fortuitous outcome. So I can't remember exactly what time of year we talked.
It was August of 2020.
Okay. So we were like in it.
Yes. Yes. I don't think vaccines were even a thing at that point, if I'm recalling.
Yeah, right. That's right. So in December 2019, that's when I got together with the kind of core ensemble that recorded this project. And we sat down and kind of made our plans for recording in 2020. And then, of course, a few months later.
Yes, we know what happened.
And so, at that point, it was like, there's no point in even talking about when we're going to actually do this project, go into the studio, because I at least knew really quickly that there's no way that this pandemic is going to, end anytime soon. And of course, it's ongoing. So it wasn't until 2022 that we all had the emotional bandwidth to actually start creating again. Because even though in 2021 we had vaccines, everyone was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually in fall 2021, I became seriously ill and was hospitalized and almost died.
Oh my goodness, Lakshmi. I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you feeling now?
In some ways, I'm still recovering. And I mention it because it really changed my life trajectory in a lot of ways, and how I feel about creating and my relationship to creating and work and family and everything. So that obviously delayed things further. And one of the kind of impacts of that illness was I sustained some lung damage. There was this question of how am I going to sing?
Mm-hmm.
So when we finally started recording, there was all of this, kind of baggage suddenly with COVID and my having been ill and kind of still really exhausted from that experience. So in a way, the album was both delayed and also became a kind of oral, auditory kind of record of these major events and in fact impacts on my actual body. Because, the way I sing now, having recovered a lot from that experience, is actually really different from how I sang at the time that I was recording.
How so?
In my opinion, I can sing a lot more strongly now. And so, I can hear myself on the album at certain points, pushing in ways that I wouldn't have had I recorded much earlier. But this actually brought a kind of fragility and vulnerability to some of the songs that wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't say that, I'm glad I got sick.
Of course.
But, just talking about timing, it's really beautiful that this album is in a way a kind of record of these events. So, by the time we started recording, I was like, oh my God, this is such a delay, but it's a kind of auditory archive. And then, of course, as I told you kind of recently, the music from the album was part of a kind of dance theater premiere that I directed and co-choreographed with an expanded ensemble of both musicians and dancers. And that opportunity came through the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago.
Fancy lady.
The time that they asked me to do this was right around when I had wanted to actually put out the album.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing was really great because I was like, this is the best way to put this work out in the world, because at the time I had been performing this music with dance live for a while. So this was just totally perfect. The timing of the MCA's invitation, when I wanted the album to finally come out, when it was actually ready to come out, it was really great. So I think in the end, the moral of the story is the idea of being productive can be really counterproductive to creating art that is meaningful and that one is proud of.
Yes.
It might be 10 years since my last album, but I'm this was the right time for this to come out.
Well, however the stars aligned is working for me, because it is so beautiful. It is so utterly worth the wait. And I can't wait to obsess over this album the way I have about your previous music. So let's get into it. This album is called Some Viscera. Where does that title come from, and how do you describe the album to people?
Yeah. So, I describe the album as being part of a larger multidisciplinary work called Some Viscera, which involves both music, but also has a major movement, dance theatrical counterpart that is very, very informed by classical Indian dance, just as the music itself is very informed by classical Indian music. But of course, other classical forms as well, like Baroque chamber music, for example. The process of writing and co-writing and arranging these songs with musicians I've been working with for many years always involved dance as well. In a way, the album, I wouldn't call it the soundtrack of Some Viscera or anything. I just think of the music and the dance being components that kind of float, and can be put together and separated in different ways, but are still always contributing to each other, even if one is just listening to the music without actually seeing any of the movement that has accompanied. So that's one of the ways that I explain it. It's always kind of complicated, but it's very important to me that it not be heard or, thought of in isolation from the movement.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I noticed, a lot of the songs have bird song. One of the songs literally is called Bird Song, which is such a special, gorgeous song, by the way.
Thanks.
But it seems like birds and flowers are really flourishing, if you will, throughout the album. So let's talk about some of the themes of the album.
Yeah.
You mentioned your Indian ancestry and honoring Indian dance and Indian music.
Yeah.
Where do the birds and the flowers kind of come in to all of that?
So the album title Sambisara really is kind of refers to just this idea of like really spilling your guts. Like that's what viscera are, right? And so here are some of the most like kind of precious, vulnerable, innermost kind of feelings and anxieties and even joys put into musical and then also on the other side of it, dance form. The project grew out of a sound installation I created many years ago that was inspired by birds, and specifically a bird I would hear in my grandmother's yard in Bangalore, India. And I never knew what the name of the bird was, but I always heard it early in the morning and in the evenings, especially because, when I got to India, I would be jet lagged and like awake at 4 a.m. and then I'd hear this bird, the way like we hear robins in North America, right? It's like, you hear it and you're like, oh, I'm awake too early,
Definitely.
So I had the opportunity to do the sound installation through Experimental Sound Studio in Chicago within a conservatory. So I was like, I want to do something involving birds. And so I eventually figured out that this bird is called the kuyil locally in India, also known as the Asian quail. And it's a cuckoo. So it lays its eggs in the nests of other birds. So other birds raise its babies. Yes, very rude. But I loved it because it was such like a fortuitous, serendipitous kind of metaphor for, what inspired me to search this bird, because it's like kind of looking for connections and finding out family and learning more about your kin networks is not always straightforward, right? Learning about yourself, self-knowledge is never straightforward. And we're also raised by so many people, right, in our lives.
Yes.
From that point onwards, I have been really invested in thinking about the relationship between birds, bird song, and memory and family, and then eventually drawing in flowers as well. So the album is really informed by, in particular, birds from the Indian subcontinent and flowers from the Indian subcontinent that are personally significant, but also culturally significant as well. And weaving those together into the lyrics of the songs as a way of exploring how these avian and floral motifs are used to create or come back to memories in the past.
So in terms of the structure of the album, it seems to me like there are a few longer pieces that almost feel like lullabies. I would call them sonic spells, of course, because that's my language. And then there are these like interstitial shorter pieces that feel a little bit more like chant or atmospheric. What language do you prefer in order to describe that?
I love that you said lullaby because I conceived of the longer pieces as lullabies. Lullabies are a way of conveying cultural anxieties and cultural knowledge more generally, a way for caregivers to convey all of that to a little baby, right, or a small child. And my brother's daughters have been a huge part of my life since they were born. And the lullabies my grandmother sang to me are a meaningful part of my early auditory memories. So I wanted to write lullabies that incorporated these birds and flowers to express cultural anxieties in a broad sense, and also personal anxieties around the loss of my grandmother when she passed away. My own kind of ambivalent, complicated feelings about motherhood or not being a mother in a traditional way, but also the joy of being an aunt whose nieces are very central to her life. So the genre of the lullaby is really important to the themes of the album. The shorter pieces, we in the ensemble tend to refer to them as interludes, but yeah, they're totally interstitial, atmospheric pieces. Some of them were completely composed and arranged by the musicians in the ensemble without my involvement and are very much their pieces and are inspired by birds, specific species. And some I put together on my own. And these are other kind of entry points into, these motifs from the natural environment and creating feelings and also exploring the cultural significance of some of these bird and flower species. There's one interlude called Garuda, which uses the names from Bharatanatyam, a form of Indian classical dance, names from that form of dance for specific hand gestures. Many of the gestures that are named in this kind of chant-like piece are specific flowers, or the Garuda itself, which is the divine bird that the god Vishnu kind of flies around on. And so I love that piece because its construction both draws on like the ways that this dance form relies on these elements of the natural world, and also plays with like the pedagogical structure of learning these hand gestures in dance class too, because normally your teacher says it and then the students repeat it, and it's like this call and response. And so I wanted to structure it in a way that kind of overcame the sometimes harshness of the dance environment, regardless of the style of dance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the ways like these like little mini pieces also do the work of the big pieces of kind of using these motifs to kind of get into these ideas about, cultural significance and how cultural knowledge is transmitted.
So gorgeous. And my ear kept picking up on different languages. As I told you off mic, two of my best friends are of Indian descent, and one of them is from South India. And so I recognized a little bit of Tamil.
Mm-hmm.
And then you told me there's also Sanskrit, and of course there's English. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
No, I think it's just those three. Yeah.
Yeah. And what made you want to weave all those different languages together?
Yeah, I mean, those are, I guess, the languages of my cultural context. The Sanskrit is drawn from the names for these hand gestures I just mentioned from Bharatanatyam. Tamil is the language of, my ethnic community. My family's from Tamil Nadu in South India. And, the sound of it is like the sound of my childhood in a way. And that's the language in which my grandmother spoke to me. This album is very much about her as much as it is about, myself or my nieces. So I wanted to, draw on all of those. Especially with Tamil, I was really interested in bringing in elements of the kind of literary movements that were taking place during India's struggle for freedom and independence. And so some of the Tamil you're actually hearing is my father and I reciting lines from a particular poem called Kuyil Paattu, or Kuyil's Song, written by a poet and freedom fighter named Bharatiyar at the turn of the century. And so in that sense, it was kind of like drawing a connection from the past into the present through language, the significance of that political moment in which he was writing.
It's so beautiful to hear the different music in the language, in addition to all the different music that you weave in. It's truly, truly mesmeric, and I just love it.
Thanks.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by UBU Skills. Got a speech coming up in 2025? Trying to start a business, get a promotion, or find a new job? Maybe you'd like to add some strength and certainty to your voice for your spell work. Megan Hamilton is a tarot reader, host of the Embracing Enchantment podcast, and a speaking, visibility, and confidence coach who loves to work with witches and folks inclined to the clandestine. If you're looking for a way to strengthen your voice, build visibility, and become a fierce advocate for yourself and for others, and hey, we might just need more of that in the coming year, learn more about Megan and grab her free speaking guide and shadow work workbook at www.ubuskills.com/witchwave. And UBU is spelled the letter U, the letter B, the letter U. Best-selling author and TEDx speaker Jericho Mandiber calls the Shadow Work Workbook an equal parts raw roadmap and warm hug. And while you're there, you can find out how Witchwave listeners can work with Megan at 10% off. Once again, you can find all of that at www.ubuskills.com/witchwave. The Witchwave is sponsored by BetterHelp. The holidays are right around the corner, and Matt and I often spend our time at holiday parties, and those can be super fun. But I confess that my favorite part of the holidays are things that are a little more low-key. I love going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and seeing all the decorations. And I love being cozy at home, whether that's celebrating the solstice with ritual or just curling up to watch terrible Christmas movies and eat Chinese food and drink some hot cocoa. It just makes me really happy, and it's a good way for me to balance out all of that social extrovert time. What moments and things make you feel happy and cozy at home during December? Maybe you like to bake, and if you do, please send me some cookies. The more chocolate, the better, and if there's some peanut butter added into the chocolate, you'll be my favorite person. Maybe you like to make decorations or holiday cards, or you just want to ignore the season entirely and take care of yourself and hibernate. Whatever you decide, therapy is also a great way to bring yourself some comfort. And this is comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. Even if you're being an extrovert, going to all the parties, or having more of a cozy introvert vibe. For me, therapy has really helped me get through the holidays and navigate some of the complicated feelings and conflicts that can arise. It has truly been a huge part of how I generate comfort and care for myself and make sure that I'm giving myself the love that I'm also trying to give to so many other people in my life at this time of year. I cannot recommend therapy more highly. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/witchwave today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/witchwave. This season of the Witch Wave is brought to you by Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. Good news! Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, known by fans as BPAL, has been growing by leaps and bounds since the indie perfumer's relocation to Philadelphia in 2022. The lab's general catalog of perfume oils, hair gloss sprays, and beard oils continues to expand month by month, exploring a wide range of scent types and inspirations such as witchcraft, paganism, fine art, and classic role-playing games. For their Halloween 2024 collection, BPAL has adapted Sheridan Le Fanu's gothic horror masterpiece, Carmilla, into a prolific series of 21 perfume and hair gloss blends. This limited edition series also includes some Halloween-y beard oils, such as pumpkin spice and type AB negative, plus a wealth of other delights for those who love to summon the fall spirit year-round. Look for the lab's Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for fresh updates, artistic inspiration, scent reviews, and more. Or you can dive in directly via their online shop located at blackphoenixalchemylab.com. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Lakshmi Ramgopal. So, Lakshmi, we keep hearing about your grandmother, and I know she was just such a huge presence in your life. I'm so sorry that she passed. And I'd love to hear how she influenced you and why you wanted to keep honoring her with this album.
My grandmother, the grandmother in question, is my maternal grandmother. And she is really my earliest memory in life. My earliest memory is of me sitting in a room in the house that my parents bought, their first house that they bought in Massachusetts, just sitting with her and eating slices of white bread sitting on a pillow. And that's my first memory.
Wow, that sounds very soft and fluffy all around.
Totally. And like her sitting on the couch, probably watching Julia Child.
Yes.
Yeah. She was there at the very beginning and was one of the people who raised me. So, my relationship with her was deeply loving, and I was the center of her life, really. My mom likes to say that my grandmother wouldn't even let my dad hold me. She always carried me because I was just her sun, moon, and stars. And I really felt that love growing up. And of course, because she was so close to me in that way, there was, of course, the kind of friction that you might expect too in a, parental or semi-parental relationship. So her loss was just really profound in terms of how it changed the world for me. And simultaneously, it represented also the loss of knowledge into, my family and its past. And so that has been a turning point in terms of my art practice more generally. I shifted away from electronic music, started to use the Shruti box, which is a bellows instrument but doesn't have keys. Started working with a violinist, a cellist, a vibraphonist, another vocalist who's also a dancer. I really wanted to feel in a way that I couldn't feel while playing electronic music. I wanted to be playing an instrument and feeling that instrument in my body. And the Shruti box, because it's a bellows instrument, I kind of breathe and move and sing with it. And it's a little bit hard to control because I play it in an unorthodox way. So, her loss has really sort of had this kind of magical transformation in terms of how I work as an artist and also what I'm interested in doing through my art practice or creating through my art practice, thinking about cultural knowledge, thinking about cultural production in relation to nationalism and Indian nationalism in particular. The role that Indian nationalism plays in the creation of art that's associated with India, dance and music, which are in turn the contexts of my childhood learning dance and Indian music. And then how much of that was, important to my grandmother who wanted to make sure I learned those things and she learned them herself as a child. So there's this kind of circular quality. Everything keeps coming back to her in this inevitable way.
This is a bit of a personal tangent, but I just feel called to share this. So last night I had one of those profound dreams where my grandfather visited me. And one of those dreams where it's it's more than a dream. It really felt like a visitation. And he literally said to me something to the effect of, the odds of us ever knowing each other are so astronomical that we're so lucky we found each other and we love each other and loved each other this much. And he passed away, a long time ago. But it was a really incredible visitation. It still lingered with me, and feeling that love is just such a gift. And I immediately called my mom when I woke up. It was her father, and told her about the dream. And we had this beautiful conversation about him and how wealthy we are in love in our family and, with particular relationships. So hearing that you have that kind of connection and still feel that love with your grandparent, even after she's crossed over, is so moving to me. It's such a lucky, lucky thing. I know not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if it feels spiritual to you to be writing and performing this music. Do you feel spiritual or magical connection to her?
I do. And I think it's most clearly conveyed in the song The Nightingale, which is a lullaby for her. When I composed it, I had in mind the time I spent in the hospital when she was there in a coma, and they're there and they're not there. Whenever I sing that, it's an intense song to sing. And there's always this kind of exhaustion afterwards, and the kind of exhaustion that you feel when you have let go of something, almost in the sense of an exorcism, but not necessarily in the negative context in which that term is used. And I really feel like I'm channeling something, some part of her, some energy. It's very hard to describe. Actually, something that we included after recording the song, there's a moment of kind of chaotic sound in the middle in which, my vocals and the vocals of Asha Roland, who's the other vocalist, are kind of spinning in the air. And then it kind of stops. And then there's a sound of someone walking with the anklets that we wear in classical Indian dance. And so you hear that walking away. It seemed necessary to include that as a way of marking a kind of transition from life to death and then beyond death.
Mm-hmm.
I think that magic and power is very much there in the music and especially in that song.
Yeah, it almost feels like an ancestor altar that you're weaving through sound.
Yeah, definitely. While I think, simultaneously addressing and responding to and speaking to sort of bigger cultural and political concerns. But the personal is part of the political, right? And who I am and the art I create is very much informed by the politics of my own positionality, for example, and where my parents came from and so on. Ancestor altar, which is like simultaneously like making arguments about like how we narrate cultural history and social history through birds, for example, or flowers.
Gorgeous. There's another song that I hope that you'd be comfortable speaking to, which is the song Cremation. And the lyrics of this song are so exquisite. I have them in front of me unless you remember some of them off the top of your head. Do you mind running us through some of it?
Yes. So it starts, I will pray that your hair turns gray and glows in the night as it burns away.
So beautiful. The whole poem is just like in the tradition of ecstatic poetry, which I personally love. I know the obvious ones like Rumi and Hafiz and all of those kinds of poets are probably, again, a little bit obvious, but I just think the writing is so beautiful. And I just wondered if you could speak to what this song means to you. And I understand you might want to preserve some of the mystery, but
no,
as much as you feel comfortable sharing, I just love the writing of this song.
I love sharing like everything. I mean, it's some viscera, right? It's like really just putting everything out there.
Yes.
Including like everything I thought about this as I created it. So cremation is inspired by the cremation of my grandmother. And that was the first time I'd witnessed a cremation. And the cremation occurs very soon after the actual passing. And, it was this moment of, kind of feeling angry about her death. And so the way the song is sung, I hope to convey is a sense of almost like resentment and attempt at distancing, while simultaneously hoping for the complete dissolution of the body and, the freedom of the soul from the body, which is something that's very important in Hinduism, the desire to free oneself from the cycle of being born and to, merge with the universe. So the song kind of carries these two almost opposing forces, one of not wanting to let go and being resentful of having to let go. And on the other hand, letting go and wanting that to happen in a way that, benefits the deceased.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to the concept of reincarnation? Is that something you were raised with? Is that something you believe in? Is that something you hope your grandmother's soul gets to be freed from? However you feel called to speak to that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was definitely raised with the belief of reincarnation. I hope reincarnation is real, in part because I hope karmic justice is real because I want to see it meted out.
Yes.
And it makes me so angry to think that it might not be. But I go back and forth between this gut feeling that, of course, we must return over and over again until we've overcome our cycles, going from that extreme to being like, it's nothing afterwards. In part because I fear the idea of being reborn and suffering, because that is the heart of the principle of being freed from rebirth, because being born and embodied is to suffer. And so, that's kind of my relationship to it now. Something I found is that my relationship to spirituality and religion has changed so much over the course of my life. So if you ask me this question in 10 years, I know I'm going to answer it differently.
Yes.
Growing up, I was like a much more kind of like comfortable believer in reincarnation, but felt very distanced from Hinduism, which is the religious community I was raised in. I always thought of it as a house without a room for me. And then my grandmother passed away. My brother's first daughter was born in the same summer. And, the love that I have for my grandmother and the way she taught me to love shapes the relationship I have with my nieces. In turn, also my relationship with religion, because the final rites for my grandmother when she passed away and the religious rites associated with my brother's daughter's birth were so significant for me. All of this happening kind of almost at the same time.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'm like, okay, there's something here for me. So reincarnation has become something that I kind of think about, even if I can't always articulate it.
I just had this vision of you carrying forth that love that your grandmother gave to you, and almost like the love reincarnating and you giving that same unconditional love to your niece.
Yeah, that's true.
Because your grandmother taught you that love, And so I know you have a different literal relationship. You're an auntie to a niece as opposed to a grandmother to a granddaughter, but it still feels like that same love, doesn't it?
Yeah, love is love. My grandmother did caregiving for me, and, the opportunities that I have for caregiving for my nieces are so precious, and I realized she's my model for that. I mean, my mother showed me a lot of love growing up. I don't give her enough credit for that.
Yeah.
But, it's the grandma who gets credit because the mom is so close,
Of course. Of course.
Yeah, I think you're totally right that there is a kind of reincarnation of love. Part of me wants to wish, my eldest niece is the reincarnation of my grandmother. But I think the real reincarnation, the one that I can feel certain about, is the transference or recreation of that love, which is magical.
So magical. On that note, we're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Grimsby Hollow Meadery. Now, I happen to love mead, which is honey wine, and it's often referred to as the nectar of the gods. Mead is the world's oldest known alcoholic beverage, and it's been enjoyed in revelry and ritual for centuries. And I also happen to love it as a libation offering. And I can tell you firsthand that Grimsby Hollow Mead is really special. Never having been fans of the subtle, Grimsby Hollow Meadery set out to create meads that are as bold, daring, and imaginative as the people in their lives who inspire them to embrace their artistic side. All of their meads are made using fresh, hand-picked fruit from local farms whenever possible, and their honey is sourced from the finest apiaries. Their mead is all natural, and Grimsby Hollow doesn't use any sulfites or clearing agents in their meads, and mead is naturally gluten-free as well. Their meads are made in small batches of 6 gallons each and aged for between 7 to 24 months before bottling. They also come with whimsically designed labels and different flavors, such as their Ravenheart Black and Red Currant Mead and their limited edition Luchador blend, which includes cinnamon, chocolate, vanilla, and wildflower honey. I brought their Beekeeper Oak-Aged Traditional Blend to my family Thanksgiving this year, and it was such a hit and so delish. Shipping is available to 39 states, or you can visit their Grimsby Hollow Meadery in Middleville, Michigan. And Witch Wave listeners get 10% off mead orders by using offer code WITCH at their website, which is grimsbyhollowmeadery.com. And I'll spell that for you. That's GRIM as in magic, S as in sorcery, BYHOLLOW, M as in magic, EADERY.com. That's 10% off mead orders from grimsbyhollowmeadery.com using offer code WITCH. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Open Sea Design Co. I love beautiful stationery and paper goods, and one of my favorite places to get them is Open Sea Design Co. They create greeting cards, stationery, planners, and notebooks with the most beautiful illustrations of skulls and flowers and bugs and gods and goddesses, all of these different magical tropes. And all of their designs are on beautiful paper stock and created with this sort of Victorian haute Gothic aesthetic that I cannot resist. And now OpenSea Design Co. is offering their Witches Yearly Planner. Now, this is a daily planner created to help you chart a magical course through 2025 with 12 months of magical correspondences, rituals, and exercises. You will develop and sharpen an important set of magical skills and immerse yourself in the folklore of each month as the earth around you shifts and changes. No matter your path, tradition, or experience with magic, the Witches Yearly Planner is a guide to deepening your craft, creating useful magical tools, and developing a seasonally guided practice of your own design. And this planner is so thoughtfully designed, featuring a pocket folder, a calendar of feasts, festivals and sabbats, astrological events, a yearly overview for 2025 and 2026, monthly magical correspondences and monthly rituals, and a monthly page with lists for your budget, important dates, priorities, goals, and things you would like to manifest. It also has weekly pages with a habit tracker. So this gives you a full 360 view of all of the dreams that you would like to come true. This planner is also a beautiful object designed exquisitely and produced by OpenSea Design Co. And it was written by Melissa Jane Madera, who is the author of The Witch's Feast and The Witch's Workshop. It truly is such a special planner. It feels almost like a book of shadows or a grimoire for the entire year. Best of all, Witch Wave listeners get 10% off the planner and anything else they wish from OpenSea Design Co. by using code WitchWave at openseadesignco.com. That's code WitchWave for 10% off at openseadesignco.com, and C is spelled S-E-A.
I will pray that your hair turns gray and glows in the night as it burns away. Lie in your bed as the flames turn red and rise to the sky as you rest your head.
Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Lakshmi Ramgopal. So Lakshmi, I am trying to envision what a performance of some viscera might be like. And you've mentioned dance. Obviously, it's live music. I've seen lots of images of you with, I believe, lotus flowers and things with the other dancers. I guess, first of all, will you be performing this in New York anytime soon?
That is the dream.
Yes. Yes. Or any other live performances coming up?
Yeah. So the premiere of Some Viscera at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago was really the most fully realized form. I had a real budget and worked with many dancers as opposed to having the kind of movement be solely performed by me and Asha Roland, who is really amazing, but it's only the two of us. One of the things I said to one of the dancers who joined the ensemble for the premiere was that I am manifesting, or just putting out in the world in order to manifest the opportunity to recreate this on this scale in other cities, and particularly New York, because I mean, we really created something so magical and powerful. You know, many of us still talk about how we can feel it in our bones. The music is just so intense. And that's just the music and not the movement. So I'm really hoping to find a way to bring the artists I worked with in Chicago to New York to recreate Some Viscera on a large scale, but also to work with artists in New York as well. And until that happens, I am interested in doing smaller scale, performances of some viscera. I formed these pieces many times in the past, workshopping them. And I'm interested in going back to that. Some viscera is so multidimensional and complex that I like the idea of, taking one song and building an entire performance out of that piece. So that's something that's sort of brewing now in my mind, because I do think it's really beautiful, powerful work. And I have not seen too much like it out there. So it feels right, timing wise, to also kind of shift gears and bring this work and really finally locate Lykanthea in New York.
Yes.
Where I've been living for 5 years.
Please. Well, I certainly have ideas in that regard as well. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the name Lykanthea to this wider audience. Tell us where that name comes from and what your relationship is like to that name, because it's a name you've been working under for a long time. I imagine your relationship with it has maybe shifted a little bit.
Yeah, you are very discerning. Yes, so Lykanthea comes from, it's a portmanteau that comes from the ancient Greek words for wolf and flower, like where blossom or where flower.
Ooh, love.
I mean, speaking of rebirth, the werewolf story is kind of one of rebirth, and flowers, of course, are reborn all the time, right? Wolves have always been a very important animal for me since I was a little kid. I think for my 11th birthday, I brought my friends to a wolf sanctuary in Ipswich.
Incredible. I didn't even know there was one. I'm like, I want to go.
Yeah. There's one in New Jersey. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Witch Wave field trip. Let's go. Yes. Full moon. We'll howl. It'll be incredible. You'll play music. Oh, could you imagine? Yes. I started out kidding and now I'm like dead serious. We're going to make that happen.
It's an amazing place.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually you do get to howl with the wolves at this place in Massachusetts. So, it seemed obvious to find a way to incorporate the wolf into the kind of moniker that I would use for myself. I've been wondering if I should keep it, in part because since my grandmother's passing, I've also shifted to creating installations. And those are out in my name, not Lykanthea. And yet when I give performances associated with the installations, it's the work that I perform as Lykanthea. So I don't know if I'd go as far as call identity crisis. I'm weighing, what does the name serve? What purpose does it serve now? On the other hand, my job is very Googleable. Like I'm very Googleable. So, I kind of like how separate, I can perform these different aspects of my life under kind of different names, Lykanthea on the one side.
Yeah. Names are energetic containers, so it feels like it makes sense that you might want to have different magical containers or a magical name under which you do some types of work or not, but you're also allowed to change your mind and change the names as much as you want. I want to ask, it might be an obvious question, but Lakshmi is such a beautiful goddess to be named after.
Yes.
Do you have a deep relationship with her or your name, or is it just you're so used to it that you don't even think about it anymore?
Yeah. My relationship with it has often been one of frustration. And that's really comes from, the fact that I am in a part of the world in which it is not a name that people, encounter frequently. And so sometimes it feels like a hurdle or an obstacle. It's always been fraught. And of course, as I get older, yes, this is how I'm differentiating myself from everyone around me. I actually really like to joke. Lakshmi is a goddess of, who's associated with abundance and all things, not just material wealth, but knowledge, even fertility. And I've never felt connected to the goddess per se. I think other goddesses draw me more. I do think that the fact that I create so much in my life, both as an artist, but also in my other life as a historian and a professor, there's a lot of creating that goes on in that profession. You're right. Names have energetic power, and maybe that's where it comes from. That, I sometimes think, how am I still doing stuff at this pace, especially after being sick?
Yeah, because you're a goddess of abundance, baby. But I know what you mean. So listeners know I was born on Valentine's Day. And for most of my life, I didn't feel that attached to Valentine's Day because I'm like, it's my birthday, And so people would always ask me if I just loved Valentine's Day. And I was like, too close to it. But now that I'm in my
Yeah.
40s, I'm like super embracing it and getting really into like the mythology of like Cupid and Eros and love magic and all of this stuff. So I wonder if, as we grow in ourselves, we kind of loop back around and reconnect with those really fundamental parts of who we are.
Yeah. Everything is a circle. I mean, it really is. I mean, I think this goes without saying, among practitioners of magic and spirituality, there's no linearity. It's always cyclical, even if change is happening. I mean, sometimes I think about, how similar some viscera is to migration, even though there's really no electronics in it at all.
Talk about that. How do you see them as being similar? And for those who haven't yet had the benefit of listening to our first conversation, first of all, plugging Patreon. Please do join if you feel compelled to. You can listen to the whole conversation. But just to catch people up, your first EP was really focused on the Sumerian myth of Inanna.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of like the proto-Persephone, if you will. It's this beautiful myth of this goddess descending into the underworld and then returning. So how do you see that album as similar to this album or related to some viscera?
In so many ways that I wonder, like, am I original in any way, like with respect to myself? Like, am I just doing the same thing over and over again in different ways? But I guess that's life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's karma, right? Like rebirth. It's the cycle. But yeah, I mean, the descent of Inanna, one interpretation is that, her descent into the underworld and return to the living is in part a journey she makes as part of a process of gaining self-knowledge. And some viscera is very much about self-knowledge, the politics of self-knowledge within the context of Indian nationalism and the role it plays in the making of culture in the very personal sense of my grandmother and what I learned from her, what I learned from my nieces too. And maybe they learned something from me too. So there's that overlap. There's an overlap in, I think, the structure of the songs. I use the word lullaby to describe many of the pieces in some viscera. Lullabies have a particular structure. They have a sing-song, repetitive quality. They're often kind of creepy. Lyrically, like that's definitely true for a number of the songs in some viscera, like Cremation, for example. It's my niece's favorite song. And I'm like, it's about your great-grandmother's cremation.
Incredible.
But that description of the song structure actually applies to the songs in Migration as well, right? They have a cyclical, repetitive quality. Repetitive can sound bad, but I think it's a feature of these songs, right? They are, constructed in a way that draws in and envelops the listener.
They're mesmerizing. I mean, there's a soothing, mesmerizing quality to repetition,
Yeah. So, those are just, I think, two of the ways that they're similar, even though one uses electronics and the other really doesn't at all. And of course, they're both ambience, right? I think they fall really easily into that classification. But now I use the Shruti box to create a drone instead of washy synths. So yeah, I mean, in some ways it's like, wow, this is so different. In other ways, I haven't changed at all.
But that's so exciting for me because I love your music so much. And so the things I love about it are certainly present in this new album, but it feels like such a departure sonically for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because I just adore it so much. You keep mentioning your other life, your day job life. Do you mind telling our listeners what you do? Because it's fascinating.
So my day job, which honestly is like an all day and evening and weekend job, is as a professor of Roman history at Columbia University in the Department of History. I have been at Columbia for 5 years now. I research and write and teach about the history of the Roman Empire. And I'm particularly interested in the dynamics of relationships among Romans and people who did not have Roman citizenship, and what these kind of imperial colonial contexts look like at the level of like the interactions of individuals and groups from different political communities.
Incredible. And so this is a really dorky question, but as we're recording this right now, Gladiator 2 is out and Wicked is out, and they're trying to call it Glicked. If you see both movies, like they did Barbenheimer with the Barbie Oppenheimer movie.
Right.
So is Glicked just exactly made for you? It seems like such a Venn diagram of your interests.
This is so funny. I mean, I loved Gladiator when it came out, and I feel like it would be hard not to love it. Like, it was silly, right? But it was like so dynamic and enjoyable, and Russell Crowe is so charismatic. So yeah, I mean, of course, I was like, oh my God, there's going to be a sequel, right? Of course, there's no way it's going to be like the original, but of course I have to see it. And incidentally, I ended up on the Kelly Clarkson show for their Gladiator episode.
Are you serious?
Yes.
What? All right, I have to go look that up.
Yeah. And, they had Paul Mescal and Kyleson there. So, I just became implicated, in I guess what's now the Gladiator franchise. So, of course, I went to see it and, really enjoyed it. But of course, the original is the original, But yeah, I was just chatting with someone today about how I think I need to see Wicked too. Like, it just looks so fun.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I admit I have not seen either Gladiator. I'm so sorry.
That's actually amazing.
I need to see the original. I need to see the new one. I know they're super fun. I just kind of missed it the first time around.
I almost feel like it's like not seeing Jaws, which I haven't seen.
Gladiator's your Jaws.
Yeah. They came out of really different periods of movie history, but they're both like these kind of iconic big movies. I feel like just as it's impressive that I have somehow not seen Jaws, it's like impressive that you haven't seen Gladiator,
I aim to please. What can I say? But I did see Wicked. I super loved it. I recommend you see it too. And
good. Okay.
I'll see Gladiator, and then, we'll have met in the middle somehow. That's great.
Yes. Perfect.
So in our final moments together, I just want to give you the opportunity to talk about anything else that you're working on, anything else that you want people to know about, certainly how they can listen to the album, but what else do you have cooking?
Yeah, I am really interested in leaning more into dance and movement. I've started to kind of brew ideas about how to, bring that more into my practice as an artist. Music is not going anywhere, and I can't imagine performing all that much without music that I have a hand in creating. But I really want to, continue in this direction of producing what I guess is dance theater. It doesn't quite feel like the right description, but fine, good enough. And kind of doing both large scale projects when possible, but, also doing small intimate works too. Like, I have a dream of performing small scale intimate pieces in like black box theaters for like 50 people, for example.
Ooh.
The smaller, the better. So that's something I'm really interested in exploring more because, producing the premiere, recording this album, getting these projects done, I learned so much as an artist. I learned patience. Like, these were not easy projects. They took a lot of commitment, personal funds too.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of skills and, learned how to be a better leader, the ways in which I'm flawed as a leader. And I really want to build and grow more based on these experiences. So I'm wishing into being in my future.
I love it. Speak it into reality. And Lakshmi, where can people find Some Viscera and all your other work?
Some Viscera is available on Bandcamp under Lykanthea, and it will eventually be available on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else that you find music. But I believe in supporting spaces like Bandcamp, which really support artists. So that's going to recommend everyone to find the music.
Fabulous. And if people want to follow you online, your website, your Instagram, anything else?
Yes, it's all at Lykanthea and lykanthea.com.
Perfect. Well, Lakshmi, you have given me an abundance of pleasure and inspiration and magic, and I am just so grateful that you exist. Thank you so much for your music and your friendship, and thank you for being on the Witch Wave.
Pam, thank you so much. I mean, the feeling is so mutual. It's such an honor that migration has been part of Witch Wave, and, an honor that I couldn't imagine just being part of this. So thank you.
That's it for the show. Thank you again to Lakshmi Ramgopal for sharing her spellbinding lullabies with me. Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Drop us an email or voice message over at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you just might make it on the Witchwire. The Witch Wave is a Phantasmophile production written and produced by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was recorded, edited, and mixed by Josh Wilcox and/or Walter Nordquist and myself. Our theme music is the song Hand and I by Lykanthea. Our new Witchwave logo was designed by Thunderwing. Special thanks go to Matt Freeman, Laura Antal, and Cece Pascal. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website, and now buy Witchwave merch at witchwavepodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at witchwavepod, and you can check out my witch emoji for iPhone by going to witchemoji.com or downloading it in the App Store. My books Waking the Witch from Gallery Books and Witchcraft from Taschen are available everywhere now. And if you want more Witchwave or you would just like to support the show, please join us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/witchwave. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on The Witch Wave.